Welcome to the 6th episode of Behind the Algorithm, where we're joined by digital strategy consultant and founder of James Leigh Consulting, James Leigh. We're also filming this episode in a new space in London, courtesy of the co-working company Spacemate. And finally, we're welcoming a new host to the lineup who some may remember from episode 5 on AI and consciousness. Nigel O'Neill loved it so much, he's decided he wants to join us to build out the podcast, both as a co-founder and co-host. Before we get into it, James, would you like to give us a quick introduction?
Thank you very much, Craig. It's wonderful to be here with you both. I have a real interest in the delivery of technology, how it shows up for real people, real consumers. And what I'm looking forward to today is taking some of these bigger, more ethical, moral and philosophical points and working about how we translate those into application.
Excellent. Well, let's start straight into it. So I think let's set the scene to start with. For some people coming into the topic of transhumanism, maybe a new concept to them. So I think what would be really good to do is, can you define what is transhumanism? And why is it important to be discussing it at this point in time?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say.
So obviously this is a hugely broad term, and I don't think anyone's got a fixed definition that they would necessarily commit to around what transhumanism is. For me, it's about that exciting moment between the grey area of what it is to be human and what it is to engage with technology, about how we can live longer, better, more satisfying lives as a technology output, but also about how we augment ourselves both consciously and unconsciously.
I think it's defined as the ability to augment yourself using technology. Sure. But you talk about being quite an exciting moment, the sort of transitional position between being human and being augmented by technology. Yeah. So I don't know how exciting that is, rather kind of a bit scary.
Yeah, I think excitement and fear can sit side by side, and it's about how conversations like this one can give us a collective grammar and framing to move in a positive direction so that we don't get overwhelmed by fear and we don't get stymied by it or paralyzed by it.
Yeah. Nigel?
So where do you think we are with transhumanism now? I mean, it'd be great to, I think it would be great to contextualize it. Let's get some examples out on the table and talk about which we consider to be, maybe transhumanist. If there is such a word.
Yeah. I think we're defining words as we go with this. This is such an evolving space.
We are creating language.
Why not? Let's do it.
Yeah.
So I guess the go-to example that people have would be to be a cyborg. And,
like the Borg from Starship Enterprise, from Next
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's kind of what people have in mind, isn't it? Or
Data.
I think Data's a robot, isn't he?
Oh, he's a full-on android.
I don't know. Yeah. I'm more of a Star Wars guy than Star Trek.
I mean, obviously this is getting down into the weeds here, but what's the difference between a cyborg and a robot? When do you become a robot and when are you a cyborg?
Partially augmented versus total synthetic being.
Well, once if I took my brain.
And uploaded it.
Yes.
And then put it into a fully synthetic, like one of those new robot things that they're creating, not the Tesla ones, the other ones that look far more friendly.
Well, yeah, what happens if we did that? Would that be transhumanist? Well, transhumanist, yes.
I think that becomes post-human, and that's probably a different subject for a different day. I think that's probably sliding into a more future-thinking conversation. I think the transhuman conversation is on the table now, augmentation.
Solely augmentation.
Yeah. I think that's kind of a piece there, and I think we'll get into talking about examples of cyborgs who are sort of in the world now, or people who've recently passed. There's lots of ASL advocates and scientists who managed to extend their life when they had a terminal diagnosis, and I think that for me falls very squarely within the transhuman space. Whereas uploading my brain into a robot, into a cloud, that feels slightly different to me.
So, I mean, sorry, just before you move on, I was going to say, one of the things I've got is, so what counts as being transhuman in terms of technology? So if I have a wearable, is that part of the transhumanism movement and philosophy? Or does it have to be fully integrated
into your flesh?
Yeah, I think, give me an example now. What kind of wearable you had in mind for that one? Maybe we can pick into that.
So yeah, let's delve into it. So an example we've got is, do you remember, I think it was in last year, then Meta released the glasses.
I had to go with them. They're quite fun.
Yeah, they are cool. They are very good. My kids find them fascinating. They love it. And also within that as well, what they actually did as well is the kids from Harvard,
It's a good point.
basically set up a system because it's got a camera in there and real time went around the university and basically were able to identify who people were, what their addresses were, look them up on Facebook, LinkedIn, all their social media profiles, and actually identify these individuals as they walked around the campus. Does that count as being transhumanism? Because actually I'm using data, AI, to assimilate all of that information and then have it fed back to me in real time, and it's augmenting my knowledge.
As we were saying a minute ago about the evolution of the language around this, we are kind of pulling in two slightly separate directions. I think that's where a lot of this sort of exciting stuff happens. So the word cyborg originates in 1960. So we have 65 years since that word entered the lexicon. Think what's happened in those 65 years with technology and our relationship with technology. I'm not saying the people who came up with that couldn't conceive of the world in which we live. I can't speak on their behalf. But I think when you take the cyborg idea, the sci-fi 60s, 70s, 80s thing to most people, it's about having an implant or a metallic arm, or it's very Terminator-y, it's in that kind of space. What's to say that as we move into defining a transhumanist point, that those cyborg augmentations are temporary? For example, you're a cyborg when you put your Meta Ray-Ban glasses on, or if you've got your AirPods in and it's doing live translate like a little Babel fish out of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But the moment you take that out, you've disengaged with a transhuman experience. So you are not transhuman. You are having a transhuman moment.
So what you're separating out there is experience from the thing.
Yes. So you don't have to define yourself as living as a transhuman entity. You are having a transhuman experience.
So great. I can see you're desperate to jump in with your mind's whirring away, and I can see that you're.
I think to touch on your point about whether it's integrated into us or whether it's external from us and we use it to augment our experience, we already have like a number of devices which have been normalized.
Yeah.
We've got cochlear devices, we've got pacemakers, of which are more integrated into us, right? If you've got a pacemaker, if you've got an artificial hip, I think what Neil Harbison's new sort of color sensor, we've got Apple hearing aids coming out. We've got a whole raft of new products that are being developed to augment our senses and augment our ability to be better humans, be amplified in some way.
Some of those are cognitive amplifications.
And some of them physical.
Then also we've got the longevity side of humanism, which is looking at, okay, how do we use technology, wearables, heart monitors, health monitors, sleep monitors, and all of this data, which is then also, for some people, they consider that part of the whole transhumanism movement about that anti-aging.
Yeah. So I can see an argument for that.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure I buy it. I've recently stopped wearing a smartwatch for exercise because I got too obsessed with the data. It took all the fun out of it. It stopped it being a mindful experience. So whilst I was able to get my health age, as it said on the app, down to well under my physical age, I didn't feel like that was necessarily adding value to what I was trying to get from exercise. So now I've gone out running, I don't wear a watch anymore. And I'm experiencing that moment almost out of time. So is that a longevity moment because I'm getting more out of my day philosophically, and it becomes a meditation moment?
So it almost gamified.
You gamified it too far, Greg. It took all the fun out of it.
So the notion of looking at your app on your smartwatch or your phone related to the data, you going out for a run, you were trying to work harder so that you could bring your heart age down.
Yeah, I was trying to get my VO2 max to like a higher level.
Yeah. If you could explain to me what the VO2 max is.
I want to explain that to me. I'd love to know. Number went up, so I was happy.
I've got it on my bike computer. And I'm going, really? I know my VO2 max. No idea what it means. Is it actually useful?
I think it's your ability for your body to absorb oxygen. I don't know. We'd have to.
Yeah.
So I think on the subject of the sort of cochlear implants, the new devices that Apple's coming out with, hips, pacemakers, all that kind of thing, are these ever more innovative solutions just an evolution of what we've already got?
Potentially. And what I like about things like Neil Harbison's work around color and vision and stuff around that, it's moved from the aesthetic and the artistic into like creating an equity of access moment and people with pacemakers and cochlear implants. It's using transhumanism to allow people to participate in society in a way that without that technology may not be able to be done in that way.
Is it also allowing them to participate in new ways in society? Because we all have our biological limitations. And if all of a sudden you augment yourself and you are able to, I love that, the idea of the antenna and be able to hear sound.
Yeah.
So not sound, sorry, hear color.
Yeah.
Color.
Like almost giving you enforced synesthesia.
Yeah. And that is quite amazing, isn't it? So we're actually creating new sensors which are going beyond, because for most normal people, we can't hear color. But for someone, all of a sudden you can. And that is quite a whole new realm of, different sensory experience.
I think my understanding of synesthesia is pretty limited. I'm not sure that it's necessarily going to be something that is going to appeal to everybody. And I think there are some people who don't have a choice around having a synesthesia experience, who wouldn't necessarily advocate for having it if they could have a choice in it. I can't speak on their behalf. But again, maybe it's again about an equity of access moment and saying, if that's something you as an autonomous human want to experience from the world, and we have the technology for it, do we want to make that body autonomy available?
So just quickly, I want to touch on two bits about the body autonomy thing.
Yeah.
Quite interesting. The first is I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about the notion of, so we can now rewrite the genome. So if me and my partner, we're going to have kids, there is sort of a hereditary illness going on in the family, we can use CRISPR as an example to edit those hereditary illnesses out of our child. But we could also, in some circles, they can define the hair color, eye color, certain features, and actually write the DNA of that human. Does that then remove the autonomy of that? So the question came up, well, what if you design your baby, have your designer baby, you could give them brown hair and blue eyes or whatever, or blonde hair and blue eyes, but then they come out and when they get to a certain age, they want to dye it. And then as a parent, you go, we spent loads of money trying to get you to look in a certain way, and now you're changing it. Once we started getting into that genome mapping and altering, do we lose the autonomy over ourselves? Over ourselves or our loved ones?
I was going to say, in that case, is that losing autonomy over ourselves or losing the autonomy of the child?
Losing the autonomy of the child in that case.
Yeah, because I think that's slightly different. At that point, as a parent, when you're sort of designing, going, well, I don't want this, and I want that, I want these features, and blah, 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 blah. That's you as a parent projecting onto an unborn child what you think will be beneficial to them in future. The unborn child then has its own autonomy when it's born, or is old enough to, exercise that autonomy.
So I guess what we're talking about here is two different strands of technology. One is this CRISPR style technology, which is almost at the point of departure where that person becomes a conscious being and is alive. And the other side of the transhuman bit is, what does that conscious being do with their body once they are conscious and alive and participating in the world? So as an interesting philosophical point, somebody could go through the gene editing process, edit their future offspring, and then that future offspring could then augment themselves in a, antenna, sound, color type way. So we've got two layers of transhumanism happening there. Which one has the greater ethical implications?
Because with all of this, as well as, we shouldn't ignore that there are lots of ethical, legal, and also moral questions around transhumanism. We're not going to go into that today, but I think it'd be ill-informed of us not to say that those things.
For sure.
But I think when we look at it, 'cause it's one of those things as a parent. I remember when the children when my wife first became pregnant, we were so excited that we're going to have a child. And then you immediately go, okay, so what about hereditary diseases? And my wife beforehand was screened, I was screened. What becomes then a medical intervention? When does it stop being a medical intervention and then start becoming an elective intervention to actually consciously design something? And that's what I find fascinating about transhumanism is, medically you can turn around and say, right, I don't want my child to suffer from these illnesses. No, I don't want to do that. But at which point you're actually crossing the line where you're actually taking away, going, okay, we're going to make you less susceptible to heart disease, less susceptible to other major illnesses. And where is that line between medical and
the unspoken third element in that line is a bit of a eugenics conversation, and I think that then gets into a tricky societal link. Eugenics obviously only happens on scale, but if you start implementing technology around perceived positive traits or perceived positive characteristics or chosen characteristics, is that degrading or denigrating what it is to be human? Because if you can't define what it is to be human, how can you define what it is to be transhuman?
That's a good good point, because actually, if you ask people, we picked up in the last conversation around consciousness. If you ask people what is it to be human, everyone's got a different perspective. And we can sit here in London and go, this is our perspective of the community of, or the society we live in London. But if we went to, say, Africa or Asia or South America, they all have a different perspective of what it means to be human. So in it's almost, we're talking about a shifting field. That transhumanism could mean one thing to one person in a different region. In a different society, it means something completely different. And what is acceptable here as sort of medical intervention or so forth could be considered extreme transhumanism somewhere else.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So what does it mean to be human in a world where transhumanism is becoming a norm?
So
if transhumanism becomes a norm, what does it then mean to be human?
So if we take it that in the sort of the modern Western experience, technology has become really prevalent, are we arguing that to some degree, a lot of people that we are going to interact with today in London are going to be somewhere on that scale of transhumanism, who are going to be augmented in some way? Do that
from artificial hip right the way through to brain-computer interface via Neuralink.
Exactly, and also there's a scale on that.
We're looking sort of 10, 15 years ahead.
Yes.
Right. How do we engage with those people?
I think we are those people, Greg. I think we engage with those people because we are participating in a society where everyone is on a scale of that. Currently. I think there is a current, if we're taking the loosest possible definition. So, if you talk about transhumanism as the use of technologies to enhance one's life, I used ChatGPT on the train on the way here today to help me write something because it was 6 o'clock in the morning and my brain hadn't fully kicked in. So I thought, do you know what I'll do? I'm going to outsource some of that thinking to an AI. It's like, okay, cool. I mean, it's nothing like big or important I was trying to do. It's just trying to rewrite the adverts we sell in my car. But, it's still something that I didn't quite have the bandwidth for. So
it's you mean you hadn't had your caffeine yet?
Exactly that. Yeah.
The coffee hadn't kicked in yet.
Which is an augmentation.
So
experience. One which is integrated within us only for a short period.
Yeah.
I mean, the same could apply to nanotechnology. If we were, I know we're sort of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but if we have an illness of sorts, we take drugs for it. Let's say we have a heart condition and nanotechnology can go in and solve the problem and then disappears, absorbs within us rather than taking pharmacology. Is that then a transhumanist element to it?
Again, as we talk about it as being moments and experiences, microtechnology working inside your body at that moment, I think you've moved more into cyborg territory. But at the point where
it stops,
have you then entered into a different state, into a post-cyborg state?
Post-humanism, again.
To be a cyborg, though, does it have to be integrated into you?
In its original definition, yes.
Otherwise, every time you ate a carrot, you go, I am now carrot. I'm eating a carrot, so I am now a carrot. Now, some people may associate with being a carrot, good luck to them. But I think when you're talking about those nanotechnologies, and it's amazing where we're sort of going towards on this capability, is it a case of this is about medical intervention and it's not about transhumanism? This is about just aging and enabling us to age more successfully for greater quality of life and a greater experience, because ultimately, at some point there is an end point, there's a terminal point where we all shuffle off this mortal coil, stealing from Shakespeare. Is nanotechnology and, clearing out your heart valves because you've eaten too much cholesterol, too much cheese or something like that in your lifetime, is that just a medical intervention? And is that just part of anti-aging rather than transhumanism?
Off to you, Greg.
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw it.
No, it's good.
No, I would say medical intervention for sure, rather than because we're still trying to define what was your term? Moments versus
moments and experiences versus being inherently defined as transhuman or being defined as cyborg.
Yeah, I guess we're talking about going from being a human that has some element of intervention, be it medical or be it technological, hip, pacemaker, medical, nanotechnology, versus someone who elects to augment their body in some way permanently by some sort of advanced technology like Neuralink's brain computer interface, like I was reading about grinders, not what you think, are people who do DIY augmentations to themselves to integrate things like RFD chips into their fingers, magnets and stuff. They're doing this themselves in their bedrooms, probably not their bedrooms, but with sort of unregulated doctors who are doing this kind of stuff to augment themselves to be more computer-esque. There's going to come a point when we're able to integrate microchips into us. I think someone put in a Wi-Fi router into their bodies so that they could always have internet. It didn't go well. It went badly.
Yeah, willing to believe that.
And their body rejected it, so they needed proper medical intervention. The notion is, so we were talking about body autonomy earlier.
Yeah.
I think when people elect to augment themselves permanently using advanced technology to improve their senses, I mean, cataracts. I mean, what's it called when you have your eyes zapped?
Lasered.
I mean, that's potentially transhumanist because that's a quite advanced technical intervention that has a permanent impact on that.
I think philosophically, the idea where people are augmenting their own beings sits really well with me. I'm not a huge fan of the idea of a gatekeeping moment. So, if I wanted to augment myself, why do I need to effectively spend money and seek permission, as it were, from either a medical establishment or a technology giant? Why do I effectively need to ask Bill Gates if it's okay if I put a chip in myself? Whereas I'm putting that purely as a philosophical point.
Yeah.
I think the regulation and governance around this is incredibly important. Yeah. But I have a sympathy for the kind of person who says, I want to do this thing with my body because I have thought about this as a functioning adult. And maybe that's part of the experience of them understanding their humanity by putting their RFD chip in their hand so they can bip in and bip out on the underground.
There was another one, actually, which I'll raise, which I said to you the other day. There's a guy in the States who, as of reading the article, I can't remember when it was printed, but he was getting a vibrating just above for intercourse. At what point do you say this is an intervention which is fucking totally nuts versus actually we approve this? Would you approve that if you were sitting on the governance board and the regulatory board?
I think that's a personal choice. I think it's a point of matter. And I think we could become too either prudish or snobbish around technologies. We could say to people, we as a society allow you to have a brain chip to make you a more, quote unquote, productive member of society.
But we won't allow
at that point, we are imposing an arbitrary definition on what we have collectively decided is acceptable and unacceptable transhumanism, which I think is not in the egalitarian equity of access mindset that hopefully this is leading us towards.
That will happen, though. That will happen. That's exactly what will happen.
Is that not part of being in society? Is we do create these guardrails around technology, and the guardrails are there to protect the vulnerable, protect us as because sometimes individually we may think it's a brilliant idea, but collectively, if we all start doing it, actually it could lead to harms in society. I love the fact you raised it because I think it's one of those things when I look at this whole piece about what should we be allowing, because if we look at the capabilities, potentially there's some amazing things you could do, and it goes beyond being a medical intervention to help create quality of life and longevity and anti-aging, whichever way you want to look at it. At some point, it then goes into the business world where you go, okay, when is it going to be acceptable that you kind of feel as if you have to be upgraded, you have to be augmented? When is that going to be, at which point do we cross over that line? Is that ever going to be acceptable? And what's that going to do to us as society? What are those?
Yeah, I mean, this is where I start getting really interested in this stuff because it's got the implementation moment and that delivery moment that I find really interesting. I think broadly, as sort of about society, I think got two things there. Got the governance element, and there's a perception in technology that we're all anti-governance, so we're anti-framework, and that's true. I think it's about meaningful governance and meaningful frameworks. Yeah. But there's also just the weight of public opinion. I don't think that there is a weight of public opinion, definitely not now, and I can't envision one being anytime soon, where en bloc and en masse, we would say, yeah, cool, hook me up to the system. I just don't think that people are going to have the appetite for it. And if the push for adoption comes from employers as a point of insistence, people don't like being dictated to by business.
I think it will come from the normalization. And as you were talking about this, I was thinking about the armed forces, and I was thinking about a few not done in the same way these days. It's all wars are run by drones. Wars are generally kind of managed on a soft power basis with sort of manipulation. But if you had an army, you would want them to be borderline superhuman, because you want them to run all night, fight all day, never sleep. But that same implication, that same mentality applies to the productivity within the workplace, which is why we're seeing swathes of employees sacked off in place of using AI.
Yeah.
But you still need the people.
You do still need the
Run it
people.
solely on AI.
Absolutely.
So if as an employer, you could augment your staff to be better, to learn all the languages under the sun of which your company operates in, why wouldn't you?
So I think there are two bits around that. I keep doing two bits today. I think I must be enjoying the
balance.
I'm trying to do the balance bit, aren't I? Yeah. So the first bit around that for me is is about the pace of change. The idea that we are in a never-ending disaster capitalist arms race of making our humans that do the thing better and faster and quicker, and that I think will take a longer technological point and adoption point than a rethinking about what economic structures are going to look like in an increasingly post-AI world. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you honestly think that will come first?
I think that
we're going to upend economical structure before we get
to the point where there'll be mass adoption of people saying, put a chip in my head, I want to work for Amazon.
I think you overestimate.
You know me, Greg. We're never optimists, I like to. And then the other...
I think you overestimate the current structures that are in place and how
very possibly
people don't want to mess around with those because they serve their purpose.
Very possibly. And then the other bit around you saying all the languages a company operates in, all the different parts of the world. Why, as a company, would I invest in an incredibly expensive piece of software or technology or the maintenance of it for an employee who is always a temporary employee? All employees are always temporary. No one works anywhere forever. When for the sake of a couple of £100, I could just buy them a pair of AirPods, stick them in their ears, and as of today, they could do live translation both in and out. So as a company, if I'm trying to, in an increasingly overhead conscious world, as we've got more and more technologies that are driving overheads down in certain parts, why would I align myself to a cost base for a temporary employee when in actual fact I could just say, well, just use the tech. And then it's that augmentation point that we already have.
Well, that's crossing into a different topic of conversation, which is around how do we treat our staff?
Well, yeah.
Going into what's that workplace like? What's the environment you're working in? I think with the augment, to pick up on the question you sort of, the point you raised, with technology, as it evolves, there is going to be a expectation and a weight of pressure that people start to feel as this becomes more available, that they need to be able to do that as well. Yeah. And I think it's not necessarily an outright, people go, right, you must do this and you must have these certain capabilities. And if you can't be upgraded, you are not, going to be part of the team sort of thing. Yeah. I don't think there necessarily will be that in the short term and for the foreseeable future. But we may get to a stage whereby it becomes an expectation.
A societal expectation.
Societal expectation. Yeah. And that's a very more subtle pressure which gets applied to people because, as Greg said, it becomes normalized.
Yeah.
So nowadays, we look at people who don't have a smartphone and go, wow, that's quite different. But we do. You kind of expect it. If people haven't got WhatsApp, you're like, well, you don't have a smartphone. You've got a feature phone. And so there's a societal expectation. I think that could end up putting pressure onto people.
So let's go back to the languages example. So in a world in which you can effectively upload the ability to speak a language to somebody, that's a very flattening effect. So you can say, right, you now speak French. Well, French from which region of France? What dialectics? What cultural impacts? Compared to somebody who learnt French. Now, the learning of French is going to come with a story. It's going to come with a narrative about holidays that you spent there or an aunt that taught it to you and all those exciting elements. If it's just a simple case of uploading the language to somebody, why would you bother when we can do so much stuff with the technology we already have today? It's like a bit in The Matrix where he learns Kung Fu. Yeah. The point about learning Kung Fu is it's hard, physically hard, emotionally hard, takes years and years. By the act of learning it, you learn more about yourself. It's not just about being able to throw punches. It's so much more than that. I think that you'd end up with two different levels.
I think you should sit on the governance board because I think you make some really good cases here for why we should be sort of really cautious about integrating technology into our sort of daily lives and taking over from the joy of learning things. Other than that, I think you make some really good balanced cases, but I just don't think that's how we'll move forward because this intelligence has been commodified. Relationships have been commodified. Everything in our life has been commodified by corporates. Intelligence is now being commodified to a point where I just don't think that it will matter that much. And if there's an ability to be upgraded, the people who can afford it will, and it will be driven by society. Because if I'm a leading hedge fund manager, and I'm competing for my bonus against 5 other people in my organization, and there's something that's going to give me the edge, I'll pay to integrate it, right? And I'll pay to have that specific dialectic in French that I know that my client's wife has, and it will allow me to deepen my relationship with her because I can. And then once that starts filtering through society more broadly, more people will do it. But they will do it themselves to give themselves the edge within the corporate world. And then corporates will say, oh, if you don't have these skill sets and if you don't have this integration with whatever, we won't consider you for the job.
So I think, again, that's all still predicated on the idea of having an employee. So when I was talking about upending the economic structures, I'm not necessarily, suggesting that we're going to be moving to universal basic income or anything like that in a sort of a post-money world. But increasingly, we're seeing a different relationship in a post-pandemic situation to how people interface with a work environment. The idea of the employee has now materially changed. And I think there's a lot more around loose affiliation networks and consultancies and people seeing value and benefit in an aspect of somebody to do business with. So you might say, okay, I don't need Greg to be all singing, all dancing. I just know that he does this one thing brilliantly, and that puzzle piece fits into my puzzle that I'm creating. The fact that he's augmented his brain so he can speak a Breton dialectic version of French, sure, interesting, don't really need it. So, crack on.
One of the things, so I'm a little more positive than maybe Greg about the future. I don't think we are going to, we do have some agency in it, and I still believe that we can influence what's going on. I think one of the things which I sort of just wanted to throw in as a bit of an experiment is you talked just now about not needing to be able to speak French because you don't need it for the particular task you're doing. There is a certain element you get from a reward system where you learn that subject, you learn that language, you picked up on it earlier, you gain that knowledge and you acquire that knowledge and that capability, and then it's something you're proud of.
Yeah.
And it helps to differentiate you. If we can then just download it, the instant flick of a switch, all of a sudden I can speak Breton French, as you mentioned earlier. What does that do to my mental health?
Yeah, I think it creates a disposability for sure.
And would I be in a situation whereby actually the mental health implications of having these technologies and these capabilities, all of a sudden, just because I can download it, I've got no reward for doing it. I haven't earned that reward, if that makes sense. Because our biological bodies are built upon that sort of try hard, strive hard, go to the gym, work out, push yourself beyond those limits, get your VO2 max coming down, that sort of thing. Then all of a sudden you feel good about yourself and you get that dopamine hit. You get those endorphins running through the body. And if we haven't had to earn that capability, are we just going to sit and go, yeah, I speak French, I speak German? And is there going to be, again, that mental health of society being impacted?
That disposability, that's a really interesting statement, because on the one side, you've got the commodification of, and then you've got the disposability. We've stopped valuing a lot of stuff in society because of the easy availability of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think music is the easiest example of that. So I have started buying vinyl records again. They are really expensive. And that's kind of part of the point of it. I've bought albums that I've been listening to for years and years and years on Spotify, which I don't really feel like I've got any relationship with. But I've had to go to work, earn the money, make a choice about how I spend it on a £30 record, beat on it. I know every vocal on it. I know every bit of it. But by then choosing to take that moment of expenditure, which I guess is what we're talking about here with the upgrading stuff, I've upgraded my relationship with that piece of art, that piece of culture.
You have deepened your relationship with it because you feel the current mediums for listening to it are at odds with your relationship to it.
Absolutely that,
so you've not regressed, that sounds unfair, pushed away from the innovative side of that music delivery to go back to something more physical, more real.
Yeah, the tactility of it. Yeah.
I hear there's a lot from people that I speak to on the podcast, their sort of need to want to go back, to not regress, to push back against innovation. But I just think it's a juggernaut that we are, as a society, not going to be able to stop.
I think it's about how you
corporates and commercialization.
It's about picking your battles, right? So I'm not a Luddite. I use a computer. I'm not trying to get a typewriter. But it's about picking out those moments that matter to you.
That's an interesting point. You have totally disregarded. So I use a computer. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not going to go back to using a typewriter, because you've identified that a typewriter is too far in the past for me to be able to do my job successfully. So you've written that off right?
Yep.
So you've written that off as being not good enough for you to do your job.
I'm actually going to go on a bit of a thing about transhumanism.
Go on, please.
I'm quite dyslexic. I cannot spell. Do you know what's really one of my favorite bits of augmentation? Spell check. It allows me to be able to participate in the modern technology world with that little squiggly red line that goes underneath stuff.
Yeah.
I tried using a typewriter. It's like, well, what's this gibberish? There you go. That's transhumanism in action.
With that, I find it fascinating because I have a personal interest in this topic. And because you're using technology to do your grammar, your spelling, everything else like that, is that homogenizing you and making you the same as equaling you to everyone else? Or is it just a case of society expects you to do this?
There you go.
Society expects you to be able to do that. Whereas actually your forte may be just playing music or doing something which is not related to having to use those skills.
I think once we talk about the skill of communication, everything's about communication and having more options about how you communicate. So it means that I can communicate in written form with a level of confidence that I wouldn't be able to communicate with.
So I think the point Nigel is raising is that you have to participate in a certain way.
Yeah.
It's normalized that we have to participate in a written format, typically over email, because that's the way that we communicate these days, or over LinkedIn, or however you textually communicate.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know, 100 years ago, you would have done letters, but they wouldn't have gone to people so quickly.
They wouldn't have gone to people so
you
quickly.
would have been audibly doing it.
You're visually using semaphore, all
so
sorts
you
of...
wouldn't have had. So dyslexia would have been fine.
Well, actually, in the moment before that, so you got Johnson, when he brings out his first dictionary, that's a really definitive point in written communication in English, because he's standardized spelling. If you look at the pre-dictionary, the original dictionary, which is a Georgian era invention, effectively, spelling was far more fluid. It was much more about context and grammar.
Phonetics.
Yeah, there was a lot more phonetics. People would change the spelling of their names. Shakespeare famously got his name 4 different ways.
So does my children. They may have standardized the dictionary, but my kids are still going, no, Daddy, it's spelled this way. This is how we do it. Which I'm actually okay with, because it is a living, it's a lovely, language is a lovely organic thing which breathes, it lives, it moves, it evolves, it changes.
And if you convey the meaning, then does it still have value? But my spelling is so bad, I do need the squiggly line.
But I think the point is that you still have to participate in a communication standard of which we all agree is normalized. I think the same could apply across other things. But I just want to move this on.
You're saying we went down a rabbit hole.
It's good to go down rabbit holes. So I want to go back to the idea of being able to upgrade ourselves, right? Autonomously. So we can upgrade ourselves to have specific skills. Let's say we can. And let's say we want to. Does this then create or deepen inequality within society for those who can afford it and for those who cannot afford it, moving into some sort of Brave New World type territory and Aldous Huxley? And in fact, forgive me if I'm wrong, but was it Aldous Huxley's brother who came up with the term transhumanism?
I know
might be wrong.
His brother came up with the idea of the tinfoil hat. It was a short story he wrote, when people become conspiratorial and they do that. So I know that
got
one.
one at home. No. I was going to bring it with me. No. Next
I look forward to seeing that. I can't wait. Yeah.
I think, that there is inequality will show up in any ways that it can. So we already have health inequality anyway, based on wealth and access
to... If you've lived in the States, you see it firsthand, right? I lived in Brooklyn for a few years, and you see the sort of pockets of those who have no...
health equity.
They have no health equity. Obamacare or whatever that they're on, Medicare just does not work for them. So they do not go to the doctors. They do not go to the hospital because they cannot afford it. And in fact, sorry, I know I'm going down a bit of a rant.
No, go. Dig.
You get on the subway and there are adverts on the subway that if you're not insured, you can bankrupt yourself over a broken arm.
Yes.
Which is insane for us to think about, but it happens in the States. £10,000 to fix a broken arm or a broken leg is for us ridiculous. That's nuts. Free at the point of use. Yeah, anyway.
So I think the point you're saying about the haves and the have-nots and how this becomes a technological point, there's also going to be those who have access to wealth. That means they don't choose to augment. The example you've given previously about a hedge fund manager who's up against 4 colleagues to try and get a bonus. That person is hustling. That person has got a need, potentially, in the scenario you've described, to give themselves a competitive edge. And this is one competitive edge they could choose to give themselves. I don't think wealth is necessarily going to be the determiner. You'll see people who would have access to wealth. They'd be like, I don't need a chip in my brain. I have land, I have diamonds, I have access to commodities that do not rely on technology as the driver of wealth.
Would the inequality stem from not the fact that they have that, but the fact that they have choices?
Well, so you're saying they could choose to...
They can choose to augment. Say in an employment situation, you've got, and you're not the CEO and you're not part of the C-suite, or you're not the founder of the company. You are an employee, and your role is, say, for example, you're a driver or you're an airline pilot.
You don't need to sleep.
Well, I mean, hopefully, I wasn't going to go down that path, but yes, maybe. But also, I was going to use the bionic eyes.
Yeah, so that's a much better example.
So I like the lack of sleep thing, because that would be if I could do
the
one
body
thing,
would deteriorate so rapidly.
What do you mean? Well, I'm a temple. I've got a long way to go. What are you saying?
No sleep and die.
But no, my example is there's a company which is developing it. I believe it's a Canadian company. I've forgotten the name off the top of my head. But they're currently doing trials at the moment, and I was reading about this the other day. And what they're doing is implanting new lenses into people's eyes. But these lenses are actually giving people better vision than what they had originally. So not only is it restoring their vision, it's upgrading their vision. Now, would it be reasonable for someone, in terms of that inequality, someone to be able to do that, go, right, okay, I can now go and get that job which relies on beyond 20/20 vision, to be able to go and do that? And it's not because they were naturally capable of it. It's because they could afford the surgery to go and do that. And I think that's where we're kind of talking about the inequality coming in, is the difference between those who can afford to do that augmentation and therefore get ahead, and those who maybe can't afford it.
Or does it lead to a possibly even more tricky situation? Pulls back to what you're saying, which is people then putting themselves into financial peril to get these augmentations because they perceive that they don't have the access to a job market that they want to have access to.
Yeah.
People taking out loans to go and get their eyes augmented so they can be a pilot.
The normalization of debt today, how much debt the average person is phenomenal. Just to keep up with the Joneses, to have the latest car, to build an extension on their house, to send their kids to whatever school it might be. And I don't know what the volume of debt per capita is, but I know it's substantially higher than it was 50, 60, 70 years ago, because of this drive for everyone to want to be seen to be doing well, the best versions of themselves.
I mean, I suppose a counter argument to that could be around, say, university education at the moment. And this is very UK specific, and it's different around the world. But people get themselves into significant debt to go to university with the expectation that, having achieved those grades or those qualifications, that it will then lend.
I think that's a really great analogy, because in a world where university costs a lot of money, people are expecting to see a return on that. Lucky enough to have gone to university before massively changing the fee structure,
and I that's old, surely.
I got to do what it was, I guess, to be seen quite a frivolous degree. I did a degree in film and drama. It was amazing. I learned so many soft skills. I learned some great experiences, met some amazing people, did some brilliant things that did not have an immediate translatable value into the workplace. But I think it's given me skills that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Now, if you have a world in which people are looking at a film or drama degree and thinking, well, that's going to cost me £50,000 worth of debt. What's the odds of me becoming a Broadway actor off the back of this? Pretty limited. Well, I won't invest in that time for myself. It limits the pool of ambition around education. And are we going to see the same thing with technologies, where people will go, I can only justify, quote unquote, an expensive transhuman experience because I'm going to expect to see a return on it. And how do I justify that to my bank manager?
I think there's an expectation here. So that there is the message that's fed to us that go to university, and what was it, Tony Blair?
50% was what Blair had in mind. For 50% of A-level leavers should be looking to move into tertiary education.
Yeah, so it was pushed by government to go to university, and everyone did.
Yeah.
The value of university degrees is now, and also because the current job market is a lot of those menial white collar jobs internships are being done now by AI, not needed. The labour market is looking pretty shit at the moment. But I think the same will apply when the big corporates such as your Metas, your Googles, your Apples will be pushing augmentations and the subscriptions of augmentations to enable you to get a better job. There is an incentive for them to say, integrate this chip, pay for the subscription model to this upgrade so you can have access to our LLMs and know everything about the market that you want to go into. And people will pay.
I think that there is an expectation on young people now that wasn't on us when we were young. And if that expectation is not a societal one, but a corporate one being pushed down, I'd like to see some societal resistance to that in whatever way is possible, at least engaging with a meaningful dialogue around it, giving an opportunity for people to not feel rushed into, having to adopt technologies that they don't necessarily want to, and creating space where people can learn French naturally.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think
I'm more cynical than
I know you are.
I've worked in advertising and marketing for 20 odd years.
If only we could rewind, we could plant a chip in you and rewind that. So let's give some hope back. But I think I am with you. I do think we do have agency. And I think sometimes we forget that but you do have autonomy. You can come up with something imaginative new. You can break the mold. You can change that. We want to make a choice. And I'm with you about that. I do think, though, that what you, Greg, is an exceptionally good point is around, if the likes of Apple come up and say, we've got this capability, would you like it? The Apple products are beautifully designed. They work. They're well made. They are incredible. You probably turn and go, well, I'll give it a go, wouldn't you? And then everyone gives it a go. And it's not done with being forced down your throat. It's done by you electing to do it because you buy into their ecosystem, you buy into their marketing, which does come to Greg's point. And so therefore, I think that it is tricky to then be able to fight against that, especially when you don't necessarily have those years lived of experience, because that's another thing about transhumanism, which I was thinking about the other day when we were researching for this episode. Sometimes it's about experience and years lived, and downloading that capability is just not the same as having gone through. You can accelerate as much as you want to that knowledge acquisition. You can acquire that knowledge by actually learning how to apply that knowledge in the context of that knowledge, and that's through experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's where sometimes there may be a disconnect as well with that instantaneous reward of going, oh, I can speak French now. Ah, bonjour, and off you go. That's the extent of my French. There is a good point to both of what you say there. I'm with you on the optimism side, but I'm also with you on understanding how difficult it is.
I think we're in an interesting time with young people redefining, careful how I say it, redefining how they perceive themselves in the world.
Yeah.
The whole sort of gender wars at the moment. But the opportunity for them to redefine their position in the world, if then they get the opportunity to define themselves with technology in the world, they might decide to do it. And the next generation coming through 5-10 years down the line may want to be integrated with technology. And if they decide they do, and society is moved on by that group of people wanting to accelerate their abilities much, much quicker, then I think that will define humanity.
I think that this becomes a sort of culture war moment, and people use it as a vehicle for other conversations. Yeah. And I'm not sure it's necessarily the scope of the sort of transhuman bit that we're getting into today. But if we are creating a moment in which people can create greater autonomy in their way that they perceive themselves and others perceive them, and how that then relates to their integration and moment in society, then technology being a different vehicle for a conversation around advancement has to be a positive thing then. If we take that as I know you love to come at the cynical side of a thing, but maybe the point of the transhuman moment is saying, right, if we have these technologies, it's not about enforcement, it's about choice. It's about how people want to be seen and how they want to participate and engage with society.
So you said the word integration, assimilation.
Oh, so I personally think there's a slightly different thing. Go on.
How people want to be seen. We are a reflection of society. We are a reflection of how we want to be seen in society, which is a reflection of how society wants to see us.
All the bits we're talking about here about Meta putting a chip in your brain, this is top-down corporate influence, whereas it's not an organizing group. It's not a loose affiliation of people with common aims that are pushing a societal change. This is going to be more driven by the vicissitudes of the market.
I agree. Do you remember the early Apple adverts.
They were amazing.
Yeah.
They were incredible.
Yeah. They developed it into what we understand now to be how we integrate with computers. But they built themselves on this notion of the DIY tech person, the sort of stand out from the crowd. The ability to position themselves in the market was driven by differentiating yourself. And it's very easy for a big corporate to drive that same kind of thinking within a society. So I think it will be top down, and I think it will be driven by corporate. So go on.
No. I mean, Apple is a brilliant example because they have transformed. Before, if you look at, I chat to my kids about this, and it's very topical because they've just got, my oldest has just got his first mobile phone, and we've gone for the feature phone. We've said no smartphone.
Good.
And,
good.
And gone for the feature phone. Obviously, his eyes of disappointment it did break my heart. But, every parent out there will understand that. But it is, Apple, I was explaining to him that when Apple first came out, everyone, Nokia, Ericsson, everyone else was trying to make smaller phones, more compact, foldable.
Oh, that little AC210 with the tiny little silver buttons.
That was so ridiculous.
Oh, brilliant.
It was this big.
Hands. I had no chance of using that.
It was built for a very specific market.
It really was, and I don't think it was me.
To be hidden very easily. Yeah. Or what are they? Not the drop phones. What are they called?
Burner phones. They were too expensive to be burner phones. They were expensive when they came out.
The point I was trying to convey to my eldest was that then Apple came out with this phone which went completely against it, which was touch screen, a lot bigger, all these different interfaces and everything else like that. And it just completely transformed the way we communicate. I remember looking at the corporate world and just seeing everyone in the corporate world going, right, so why have I got this consumer tech, which is so amazing, and I'm in which I can do this, and this corporate enterprise level tech looks so dated and so old fashioned. So Apple has that power to transform. And I think one of the things which sort of picking out on what you said was, if Apple comes along with new sort of technology which fits under the transhumanism umbrella, people will buy it.
People will.
Because they are seen as such, their brand, their capability.
It doesn't have to be Apple.
No, it doesn't have to be Apple. It could be anyone
that cuts through at just the right time.
Yeah, other technologies are available.
But if Apple wants to sponsor this podcast, you're more than welcome to.
We're here.
Yeah.
Okay, so the interesting thing around the Apple example is I think a lot of the Apple innovation is still trading off when Johnny Ive was still there. And there's
it's a really good point. His new company, if they want to come out with...
I was going to say, do we need to phone them up and see if he wants to come and talk about it?
What's the new company? It's a great show.
I can't remember, but maybe
John and Sam Altman has started that's a two-person company.
It's him and Sam Altman, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's it. We've just answered it. That's going to be the new Apple. And that's what youngsters, anyone that believes in sort of technological innovation is going to buy into.
There's one other point I was going to make about the whole, it's not just going to be corporate down, but there are already advocacy groups for transhumanism.
And they're driven by some of the biggest billionaires in the world.
And so there is, it's not,
Elon Musk.
Yeah. And they are out there already, and they're already sort of, because they can see this, and, we can have the argument maybe on a different podcast around profit, whether that's the right motivation and whether that will drive people's behavior. But also what I think, this is going back to a point we raised earlier, which we didn't really pick on, was part of this is quite often the guardrails of society, i.e. the regulations and the laws, are too slow to catch up with the technology. So technology races ahead. We have all these capabilities then, and people go, yeah, you can do it. Of course it's safe. Link, yeah, put a brain chip in. Brilliant. Go for it. Add all these augmentations to your capabilities and to yourself. It's only at a later date that governments and society catch up with it and realize, actually, that's now caused an ill or it's caused a harm. What point do we then get to where you go, actually, is this available on the NHS? Does the NHS, as is some unique system we have over here, but do our health services then have to pay for the damage caused? And that could be either mental health damage and I'm not saying damage, that's probably the wrong way to describe it, but there could potentially
let's maybe talk about injury. Mental health injury or physical injury. With an unregulated adoption of integrated technologies, I think that needs to be looked at not just from an ethical and philosophical standpoint, but also from a safety perspective. Is it safe to stick a chip in my brain? And what can that do to my brain?
Well, and that's the thing, the companies will race ahead and they go, right, we've got this great thing. And the market will go, oh, that's cool. That's brilliant. We want to try that. Maybe we do need to turn around and say, actually, we do. I know earlier on you were saying maybe you're not an advocate for guardrails, but I think
I personally am. I think meaningful guardrails and meaningful governance is not only societally responsible. I think it can actually accelerate innovation.
I say this on every podcast because governance always comes up, that we live in a laissez-faire economy. Governance has to come after the fact because it's the only way, it's the only way to meaningfully drive innovation. If governance is always there reviewing every new innovation that happens, those innovations wouldn't come to the fore. So we live in an environment where regulation comes after the facts. When organizations like OpenAI or Facebook realize the damage that they're causing, don't tell anyone, release it into the market so that it becomes a mainstay, so that it becomes so popular, so big that actually it's bigger than government. It's more powerful than any regulator. When it's paying the subscriptions to be part of those trade bodies, which then regulate the industries, they've won.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the case. I mean, the idea that like any body that is regulating an industry doesn't have maybe undue influence from the people who will benefit from it. I mean, this has always been the case.
They all do. You know, I spoke about this at UCL last year, but Amazon has more lobbyists than the whole of the oil and gas industry. Technology is more powerful. Technology companies are more powerful than, you know, look at Elon Musk's $1 trillion payoff over the next 10 years.
I mean, that's quite a package, isn't it?
I'm sure you've been on something similar, haven't you, in your past?
Well, maybe not in dollars.
Let's take that as an example. Yeah. Once you move into that level of personal wealth, if he is still the defining force behind the Neuralink project, for example, to keep it sort of on topic for what we're talking about here, that is somebody who, at the point where they are a trillionaire, could not possibly be motivated by gaining more wealth. So the motivations then become power, influence, and ability. So the Grok AI, right? So they've done a lot of stuff around how it's like totally open. It's obviously not. There is influence within it. Of course there is, even if it's an unconscious bias, although I think Grok maybe has slightly more conscious biases. So if you've got an AI that you can type into and it types back to you or voice to voice recognition, and it gives you a piece of information that is untrue or influences you in a certain way or acts as a propaganda element, take that to the Neuralink element and goes, okay, well, what's to stop I'm not accusing Elon Musk of anything specifically here. I'm talking about just every evil tech billionaire could...
Elon Musk is not an evil tech billionaire.
I'm not saying he is.
We don't condone that at all.
Anyone who was an evil tech billionaire...
Oh, so he was, he's not anymore though.
Could, with you uploaded to their mainframe, with you as part of their technology setup, could unduly influence you. I mean, the example that keeps coming to mind with that is the funguses that get into specific insects. They take over their brains, they make them climb to the top of the thing, and then a fungus sprouts from them.
He's been watching too much Last of Us.
Is that actual thing?
No, but there is a fungus which does that. I've forgotten which. It's beautifully horrific.
Yeah. So imagine a moment where it's not a fungus, it's a microchip, and it doesn't make you climb to the top of a tree to explode your brains, but it makes you vote a certain way or buy a certain way.
But that's already being done. That's already happening in social media.
In an inchoate way, yes. But I'm talking about direct influence.
Yeah, it's already happening.
Well, if it's no longer influence, it's control. So it goes from influence to control.
Well, we're back to where does the free will line get drawn? And I know where.
But it does, you do go to a really good point there, because and it beautifully comes back to one of our questions. You must have been done your homework. But it's talking about that whole geopolitics thing and that influence. And it is going to that sort of, when we look at technology and data sovereignty, are we going to get to a point whereby you do have that tech influence in you? And so therefore you turn around and go, okay, are you going to be ring fenced?
Like Common People, the Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, so because you've got a certain technology implant, it could be a prosthetic, it could be all sorts of different, it doesn't have to be a chip in your brain, it could be a augmentation in your arm, it could be some sort of thing like that. Are you going to be ring fenced?
Potentially, yeah.
Geofence. So you go, okay, so you've got a chip which is manufactured in this part of the world. And so therefore we're not trading very nicely or playing nicely with that part of the world right now. So therefore you're not allowed to travel. We get to that stage where they worry that actually you've got an implant. Could you use that implant to send back data about that place you're visiting? So therefore you are becoming like a covert spy. Yes.
It's definitely something to explore. So for example, to go back to the eye implants we were talking about previously, that would be a really route one way of looking at this, saying like, well, you're prevented from entering this country that we as your country of origin have a hostility with, because you've got an implant in your eye and that could be beaming images right back to somebody, we don't know who. We have a national security question that we want answering around that. I mean, doesn't take a huge leap of imagination to imagine people having a discomfort on national security level around that.
And it's the third party sale of that data as well.
Yeah.
So the data goes back into your manufacturers, let's say it's Apple or Google's ecosystem, in their cloud ecosystem. But then within the T's and C's, we can then sell your data to other third parties, which could be defense contractors. It could be pharmaceuticals companies. It could be whoever they decide, or they just sell it to a third party broker who then sell it on to other people. It could still end up in the hands of people who may use it for either commercial gain or even nefarious activity.
Or both.
Probably.
Yeah.
I'm very cynical. I've mentioned this many times because I've worked in the marketing and advertising space for so long. I know how easy it is to get hold of people's data. And I've worked with many human rights lawyers who try and lobby for data brokers to be disbanded and not allowed, but there isn't any legislation to stop them. And there was an article, I can't remember where I read it, in one of the major advertising publications, that certain new cars had the ability to listen in to what your conversations were in the car.
Right.
So they knew whether they knew your sexual orientation. They knew how often you were having sex. They knew when you were arguing with your spouse. They knew so much about
how much is going on in your car.
So I'll send you the article, but depending on what car you've got, what year it was made, it has listening devices. That listening device takes your data and then it sells it to third-party data brokers who then sell it on to advertisers who then will target you with ads based on your demographic.
What's really interesting about that, I think this links into our broader conversation, is the beginnings of the technology that led to that were actually done with really great intentions. So it was about having a microphone speaker system inside modern cars that at the point of car impact, when a crash was imminent, it would play what's known as a pink sound. So it actually was a way of protecting your eardrums against the explosive sound of the moment. So it was a way of people being safer in car crashes because they could then hear better, less disorientated, and get away from their vehicle.
That's really interesting.
So then people then hijacked, not maliciously, maybe maliciously, the technology to go, well, hang on, well, that tech is now embedded in the car. That tech is embedded in that moment. What else could we use it for?
Exactly.
And I think what this whole conversation.
How can we monetize that experience?
Bingo, exactly that. Yeah. And that's where people saw a thing that started off as a bit to keep humans safer, to make humans more human, to have a really great, clean experience of life made more possible, monetized, and then used for nefarious commercial means.
And that's where my cynicism comes in. So I talk about the commodification of pretty much everything in society. You were talking about the disposability.
Yeah.
And we see that across lots of our engagements with the world. And then we've got the monetization, which is something I've been at the forefront of for many, many years. And do not underestimate the desire for corporates to diversify their revenue channels and monetize everything they possibly can. So if we're fitted with any kind of augmentation device, guarantee the data that's picking up will be then passed back to a data broker somewhere.
And that was, I mean, for me, that was the whole thing with the glasses and the Harvard students who then, imagine that all of a sudden, everywhere you go, that data is going to be collected, that every person, everywhere you go.
Oh,
and,
100%,
can imagine, you don't need a surveillance camera on your front door anymore because, everyone, half a dozen people, they'll be all, it doesn't matter because you may have 99% great leaders. And most leaders are ethically great, but you only need one bad apple or bad actor who'll do that. But I think what I find also interesting is just when you're talking about the speakers in the car just now, it's also we need to bring in the context of globalization or the global markets. Because actually, I remember chatting to a taxi driver in one country and he said, "Oh, brilliant. When the government listens to our conversation, they know what's going on so they can resolve it for us." So they see it as a positive attribute, whereas we, because of the society and our backgrounds and where we grew up, we maybe see it as a slightly negative attribute. Again, it's a really difficult one to answer because it means a different thing to different people.
Yeah, I still think they're listening. I just don't think it's as the different people are listening. Yeah. So whilst the CCP are listening to the conversations in China, it's advertisers that are listening to the conversations in the UK and the US and other Western countries. So the only difference is the government's directing it rather than corporates are directing ours. What's the difference?
Yeah, again, it all plays into that intended and unintended consequences of technology and how does that either empower or disempower an ability for you to make free will choices about how you engage with that technology.
No free willers on apparently not that's all over. Yeah. So
I'm being very black and white about it, right? But there is an environment of which you operate in, and any decision that we made is based on our understanding or experiences that have gone before it. We can only make decisions about what we have experienced or have an idea of. We can't make random choices not based on everything that has gone before it. Ergo, no free will. Free will would determine the fact that we choose not to murder someone is because we are told in society that is wrong. We choose not to, I know I'm choosing bad examples, kick a cat on the street because ethically, morally, we've been told that it's wrong. If we were told something different, we'd do it. But we are conditioned by everything that has come before this moment, and that conditions us to say what we say.
And do you think that makes any conditioning on our likelihood or unlikelihood to adopt transhumanism as a future state of humanity?
We'll adopt it. Of course we will.
But do you think that determines the rate and pace at which we'll determine?
We won't, as a society, decide it. We will have it decided. We will be told it's a great idea and that we should do it, and we will do it.
What do you think? Because that's two great questions. Will we do it, and a pace?
So, will we do it? Well, as I said previously, I think to a certain degree in Western societies, we have already embarked on this journey.
Yeah.
And it's about working out where the saturation and adoption limitations of this take us rather than will we do it, won't we do it. We're already doing it to a greater or lesser degree. The rate of pace and the rate of change, I think, like with all technology adoption, goes in fits and starts, and there are key moments. It's not a trajectory. There'll be something that happens technologically or socially or politically that will either accelerate or decelerate. The digital ID card thing is going to be a very interesting conversation that potentially could create a new branch of the conversation around transhumanism.
Yeah. Because why?
Why is that?
Because a digital ID card, to take the example that we've got on the table here, is about creating a digital version of a thing that has existed for a long time.
Digital twin of yourself?
Well, a digital twin of yourself, that's a far more interesting.
Do you not think the digital twin is an evolution of the digital ID card?
Well, are they two separate
purposes? One is...
Okay,
so the digital twin related bit, this to me is particularly interesting as somebody who comes from a sort of building technology and implementation points. Let's say we made a digital version of you today, Greg, and we upload it with all of your past and experiences and choices you've made today.
You could then predict what my future's going to look like.
Only within reason. Okay, so that's just going to be on one path, and the real version of it. And that's interesting for a philosophical point. What I think I personally find more interesting is the actions that empowered digital version of you commits to. So let's say...
In the future or in the past?
In the future. So you've got a digital version of you, and that digital version of you commits a crime.
Okay.
Most times be a financial crime because, it can't interact physically with the world, not unless it's uploaded to a robot.
See, the digital twin.
Yeah, so the digital twin of you commits a crime. This crime has been...
I'll give you an example here to interrupt. I'm train of thought, but we are at the stage where we can cross over between the digital and the physical world. So what happens if that crime was to hack into the pacemakers or the heart monitors of individuals and cause a catastrophic event within the heart, those people who've got pacemakers, heart monitors? Because I know a few years ago, the FDA, I think it was in 2019, came out and said to a number of, there's two critical flaws in your technology, which could potentially lead to people being hacked.
Okay.
So that's, I'm not saying Greg's going to commit that crime, but say Greg's digital twin did commit that crime.
Yeah. Okay, so the point, that's a really great example. Let's put this into an actual real world potential, right? So digital Greg, as we'll call him,
has been hacked to commit the crime.
No. Digital Greg, who has been augmented to exist with all of your experiences, can then make choices based on what it believes you would do. And it has gone ahead and made a choice, quote unquote. We're talking about consciousness and AI, like you guys spoke about last time you guys met up. And a crime is committed. Where does the culpability of that crime lie? Does it lie with you because your data was the progenitor of that instance? Does it lie with the digital entity? And do we start trying digital entities? What I'm really invested in is creating a backstop there so that the influence this crime doesn't blow back on the developers or the innovators who have just simply done a thing they've created. Do they then have to bear some responsibility?
So I did, as you can tell, I was fascinated by this topic. So I went down several wormholes recently, or rabbit holes recently. And one of them was looking at the legal side of things and where's the legal standing on this. I wasn't necessarily thinking about Greg turning into Digital Greg,
Mr. Robot.
Digital Greg 2.0, going out and committing a heinous crime against people with pacemakers. But the digital twin is not recognized as a legal entity, as a legal person. So therefore, the crime has to be committed by a legal person, or and therefore, if it's say a corporate who did that, say for example, if we put it into a context of Greg we create a digital twin of Greg. He's working for XYZ corporation. If that corporation then takes that and then Greg's digital twin goes out and does a crime, they would be responsible for that. They'd be liable for that.
What you're saying is the developers are responsible.
Ultimately.
Which is very...
Because they're a legal entity and so they can be held responsible for it. Whereas, and the government, I think, I could be wrong, we may need to check this, so don't trust me on it. But I believe that the UK has said that they're not going to recognise digital entity or sort of AI digital entities as a legal person.
I think
therefore,
quite a serious rabbit hole.
I know, but what I'm saying is from a business perspective and a commercial standpoint, it's then about liability and culpability and who's responsible. So therefore, it does actually come back to the point of creating those guardrails in your organisation, which says, actually, we're not going to go down this path.
So you say that you would put a limiting factor on the technology so that you prevent having to explore what happens if Digital Greg. So we keep Digital Greg as quite a simple entity so that he doesn't have something. I was going to say autonomy, but I thought you would say there's no such thing as autonomy.
It would be choosing decisions on its own.
Yes.
So that it can have autonomy outside of me deciding to do it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that it can have autonomy.
Yeah, one creates the other, I guess.
Free will. Neither of us have free will. We have agency, but we don't have free will. We decide to do things in separation of each other, and it would do something different to what I would do.
Yeah, sure.
So this is the thing I was looking at yesterday was, say, probably a better example rather than criminality is, say you go work for an organisation. Actually, let's take you as an example, James. You go and work for an organisation, and they create a cognitive twin of you. So not a digital twin, a cognitively digital twin of you. So it takes all your processes, your mind, the way you think, not just your knowledge, but the way you process and so forth. If they then use that to then create a amazing, you are the best program manager in the world, as recognized as you are today. They take your cognitive capability, create that and turn it into a digital James. And then you go out and they use that as a tool to then go and do their program management around the world.
Yeah.
Is your cognitive digital twin. If your cognitive digital twin then turns around and says, oh, by the way, let's stick, whatever causes a mistake to happen, the company is liable because that is basically their work, their products. So therefore, even if it's a cognitive digital twin of you and it's going out and it's got autonomy to make decisions and so forth, the company is still liable, whoever is selling that service and created that product.
Well, back to the point over here about everything's about commerciality in these spaces. This is going to create a whole new vector within the insurance market.
It is.
You say like, okay, we're going to set Digital James up on this project in Singapore. He's never been to Singapore, but we're going to send Digital James there to do it. Okay, well, based on the track record of Digital James, every 100 projects he works on, 99 are delivered perfectly. But there's one that goes wrong. The average cost of that one going wrong is X. Therefore, we're going to need to buy insurance against a digital entity to the value of the likelihood of it going wrong.
There is going to be that. And I think what's also interesting is taking that example. I don't know, it's going into sort of real sort of commercial terms and so forth, but as an employee, we're just going to start looking at employment contracts. So as in the future, are we going to make sure, as an employee, are we going to say, actually, you can't have indefinite rights to my output. You can't have indefinite rights to my likelihood and my cognitive way of thinking, because potentially what a company could do is if you decide, it's like you get an employment contract and you've got 20 pages of, and people do it all the time on the internet when they sign up for things, they sign away those rights. And so it's one of the things we do need to look at will be around those, around employment law, around who has the rights to use your cognitive capability. Because as we start putting more and more of our, we're putting more and more into the systems, and software, they will be able to start replicating. This is part of transhumanism, is all of a sudden you're creating a digital version of yourself.
Yeah, it moves into intellectual capital rather than intellectual property.
And so therefore, there's going to be laws, regulations around that. Now, unscrupulous people will turn around, employment people will go, I want to own all of that for infinity and beyond. As an individual, you want to turn around and say, no,
you can't have that in perpetuity.
It's only whilst I'm working for you.
And then James will be out of work, but digital James will be doing his job.
Well, interesting.
Do you think digital James would then start paying me commission?
No, I don't think digital James would have the empathy.
No, fair enough.
Digital James doesn't get paid, doesn't sleep, doesn't care. Digital James isn't interested.
But digital James, the interesting part is, so if we have digital James, so physical James and digital James could work as a team together. What would be interesting is how could this actually transform the whole workplace and the market and the way in which employment is done. And the reason why I'm saying this is, imagine digital James, if you turn around and go, do you know what? I'm not going to work for you. I'm going to license digital James.
Just like Hollywood actors are now licensing their likeness to studios for them to use after their past.
So digital James could, not just his likeness and
his cognitive abilities.
Digital James could be licensed out, and you could be running 200, 300, 400 as the best program manager in the world, which, with that amazing ability to influence, direct and get people to transform. You could be going out and delivering multiple projects at once. And the interesting part of this is then when the physical James comes in, is what happens, because I did this research, because that will be treated as software, digital James. So digital James can run 24/7. But I looked at this, and when I was researching it, is what happens when the expectation is digital James has to intervene? And therefore, that's when the employment laws become applicable to you. Digital James is then making you have to intervene, because actually it turned out that the project you're delivering in Singapore, which Greg set you up for, all of a sudden you've got to respond to that message at 2 a.m. in the morning because digital James has hit a roadblock and doesn't know how to respond to it. Therefore, then you become, okay, is that unfair to James as a human being?
Is expectation that I, as the source material, I'm responsible for the backstop and resolving it when, the technology doesn't quite measure up to the expectations of the moment.
I think that's only, so I think we've gone down quite a rabbit hole here. I think that's only if James owns it, but he doesn't. He's licensed it for the company, and it's their responsibility.
But what I'm saying is that
he just gets a fee every time it works a month.
The rabbit hole is actually what you're taking James as you're turning James, it's a transhumanist element, because you are turning him into a digital thing and extending him beyond his natural biological capabilities.
One of the definitions around transhumanism is extending life. Yeah. And I think if you truly believe that the digital version of a person is an extension of that person, every minute that those two entities are existing is actually 2 minutes. So you're not extending past the point of death. You're extending horizontally in the moments of existence.
Your scalability. We've got some finishing questions. It's been a really exciting conversation, and I think one that we'll probably come back to. And James, we'd love to have you on again. But
Thank you very much, guys.
We've got 3 questions. Do you want to ask them to us, or shall I ask them to us? So we'll all answer them.
Shall I ask, seeing as I'm sitting at the end here, shall I answer them? Okay, so right. First one. If there are 3 things you could hack about yourself, what would it be?
Do you want to take that first, Greg?
No, you go first.
So I was thinking about this one earlier today, and I couldn't come up with 3.
Did you go on GPT?
I did GPT. The one that I would look to hack about myself would be injury recovery from sport.
Okay.
So I don't want to be able to just augment myself to be able to become more muscular or to run faster. It's to be able to give myself the space to be able to keep working at those things I want to work at.
Okay.
So that was my one sort of biohack or tech hack. Yeah, that's the one I'd absolutely love.
So you're going with 1.
I was going to go for 1. I'm going to do 1 and done.
All right.
What about you?
I have noticed, or I think I've realized, or I've been able to see it in myself, that I think I'm ADHD. And I find that I really struggle with concentrating on things for long periods of time. I get bored quite easily. And I would like to alter myself to be able to be consistent with things and to give things like learning an instrument, for example. I sort of dip in and out of it and don't really give it the time it deserves. Sure. But then sometimes if I really get into something, I can be sort of narrow focused and work on it for hours. I would like to have more control over that and to be able to decide at what times I can give things my attention rather than it be a bit wishy-washy.
Would you be still Greg?
That's what I was thinking. Does that change what it is to be you?
More stoic.
Or would you
I like that.
I'm not bored. Am I bored?
You'd be more content. I'd feeding so much. So
but I haven't experienced it, so I don't. I don't know.
What's yours?
If I could hack myself, I actually just came up with a second one, so I haven't quite got three. But the first one, I thought about this the other day, would be not sleeping without the downside.
What's the famous German experiment?
Oh yeah, the Dust Experiment is the name of the documentary, isn't it? Like it's where
72 hours,
yeah,
and they go mental. I don't know if it's real or if it's
no. I mean, but it would have to be without the downside.
Okay,
so I could just be happily awake, as we are right now, buzzing, wide awake, brain firing on all cylinders
forever.
Not forever, for my life.
Well, if it's forever for you, that's forever. Your
forever.
Is your
forever. Not forever.
So you would like superhumanize. So that's the point. So you would superhumanize. So this is a prime example.
So
I would augment yourself to the point of where you had this amazing ability that no one else had.
Yeah, but only for if I can get it, everyone else, everyone else would be available to everyone else. But there's so much to do in this world. It's so fascinating.
Like your kids would still be asleep.
Imagine that.
You'd be waking them up and get out of bed. Come on, Dad wants to do this. We're going to do this.
After they've had their sleep. But no, I'll be there going, right, okay, so I've just got up. I've been away, not got up. My whole language would change.
To completely rethink what it is to be awake.
But it would be amazing, because imagine going, right, I've planned this, we're doing that, we got here. Imagine what you could achieve.
I love dreaming. I don't think I could live without dreaming.
I'll tell you a story afterwards. One part of the research was I did into this was there was a guy, he's in Russia, and he actually did surgery on himself to plant electrodes into his brain, because I didn't realise there's
I'm skeptical about this. I don't think he put electrodes in his brain.
No, he did. There was an article, basically, because I didn't realise this exists. Apparently, there's a state of dreaming, and certain people can do it, where you can actually be conscious enough.
Lucid dreaming.
Lucid dream.
Yeah.
Lucid dream. I know what I'm dreaming.
You can train yourself to do it without putting electrodes in your brain.
Yes, but so this person wanted to then do.
Yeah, you don't need to put electrodes in your brain.
So this person was doing experiments around that, because the scientists could lucid dream, and they were doing this whole research into be able to do that. But anyway, we'll save that for the bunch. But yeah, my one would be not sleeping.
Right.
Because how much could you do?
This question. So, would you live forever in a simulation or get a second life?
So, I'm actually going to go for third option, which is neither.
You don't have a third option.
Oh, can I not?
Just one or the other.
Oh, okay. So if it has to be between those two, I do whole second life. The idea of living in
we didn't define that. Do you remember Second Life?
Oh, the game Second Life.
It's not.
I'm not living in that for the rest of existence.
No, it was a state, wasn't it? When they had like virtual events, you could go to a whole recruitment fair in Second Life, like The Sims kind of.
Yeah.
That's not what we meant, but the way you just said it made me.
Yeah. Fair. I honestly, I don't think I'd want to do either. I think, being on the arc of existence is what is core to making us human. Exactly. You're saying about wanting to not sleep. The cadence of sleep and not sleep is so integral to the human experience. I think that you'd struggle to define your own humanity.
You'd go mad.
No, but
you'd go mad.
But I'd have to have it without the downside. You can't, So love that moment. And you must have had this when you were a child, where you're in the house and everyone's asleep and it's just you and the silence of the home.
I had that this morning when I got up at 5 to get on the train to come here. It was lovely. It was fantastic. But it was only nice because I've been in bed beforehand. So that was good. Greg, how about you? What are you going to go for? Simulation or whole second life?
So I'm probably with you. But I'm on the neither, but I can't have those. If anyone's a Black Mirror fan, San Junipero, the one that won all the awards, it made me tear up. It was fantastic. I would like to live forever in a simulation that was...
You're thinking about that episode now, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I'd like to live in sort of utter perfection forever. But at what point would you go insane and get sick of it, given my state of...
Well, so your short attention span about 6 minutes.
Yeah. So, okay, so
you're trying to be generous as well, weren't you?
Whole second life.
Okay.
Because at least you get to mess up the first one.
Like a trial run.
Yeah. Make a go of the second one.
Well, Nigel, what are you saying?
I would go for... I don't want to live forever.
No.
I have no desire. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to die, but I have no desire to live forever. So I would go for whole second life. If I could rehab the life I've lived, and I'm not looking for perfection, I'm looking for the perfectly imperfect. If I could have my whole life again, Brilliant. That would be my choice.
Okay. Next question. Who do you think is a cyborg today?
Neil Hobson, obviously, I think he's got a pretty good shout to say is a cyborg. And I think that
He's the artist, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's become more than he was. So previously, I think I saw his cyborgness as maybe a little bit gimmicky. And I think as he's been in that moment for longer and longer, more and more seeing the authenticity behind it. But back to my points at the top, to paraphrase an expression, we are all cyborgs now.
That's really deep. I like that.
Well, I was just going for the superficial. Now I just feel, I've got to try and... so the artist, picking up on the artist you just mentioned, I think according to the Guinness Book of Records, he is officially the world's first cyborg. The artist with the antenna who hears hears colour.
Right. Okay.
I forgot his name. What's his name? Yes. So apparently, according to the Guinness Book of Records, he is the first official cyborg. But who do I think is cyborg today? There's a few people who I think are a little bit robotic, but that's maybe I'll say that. I don't think let's not go into libel. You don't want to be libelled and law cases for that. But let's just leave it at that.
Sure. Yeah. What about you, Greg? Who do you think is cyborg today?
I think, obviously, because it's pushed down our throats, Zuck. If you ever see him speak, it's insane how close he is to data. But I'm going to take your answer and go with everybody's a cyborg today because we all have the ability to augment ourselves using technology, which was what this whole conversation was about. And I'd like to thank you, James, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on, guys. Lovely stuff.
Nigel, to have you on board as a co-founder and co-host.
Excellent.
And guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll be back in the next couple of weeks with episode 7 on the future of social media. So thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.